Hey everyone, here Ian from White Lotus of Light. Just real quick before we leap into the video, I want to let everyone know I'm running a Black Friday sale, one day only. On the 24th of November, I'm getting giving 15% off for any readings or for any spiritual guidance. So if you would like your Vedic astrology chart done, to get your natal chart, that's 40 years and under, your Navamsa chart, that's 40 years and over, or combined charts, which gives the deepest, most comprehensive examination of your karmas and how things are going to unfold in your life. You can just enter the code that you'll find below. On this Friday, again, it's a one-day only 15% off sale. And also, I will be increasing my prices in 2024 because hey, Bidenflation is just going nuts. And so if you would like to help me, help this channel, and help my family, then I will respond by helping you and your family by giving you amazing spiritual guidance from the angels and the Most High, and or giving you a incredible Vedic astrology reading so you understand what your karmas are and what is likely to unfold. Things like your love life, business, job opportunities, windfalls, even things like health of parents, children, if you're going to have children, when you'll meet that special someone, and anything involved in major karmas in your life, I can give that to you. And I do consider Vedic astrology to be my marquee skill. It's actually what I'm best at. Angelic magic's probably second, and I will be doing angelic magic classes in early 2024, but as those aren't out yet, the discount does not apply. So if you're looking for a special gift for Christmas that'll blow someone's mind, you can also use this 15% off to book a reading for that person. I would just need to confirm their birthday, month, year, time, and location. So thank you so much. And without further ado, it's Shadow Wars, episode 7. The worm has turned. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Bye. Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light educational series. And this is Shadow Wars episode 7. The worm begins to turn. Okay, so I just did an episode on Shadow Wars, and man, there is just stuff popping, just absolutely popping. And a viewer, I don't know if he wants me to fully identify him, but Dan D sent me a video clip that I was completely unaware of. I swear to you, it's gonna, when you see this clip, which I'm gonna include in this video, and you've got to watch it, you're gonna think that I saw that and did last week's show completely based off this interview, because it has additional elements that I wasn't aware of that I absolutely would have included if I had seen it. That just like caused all these connections to go off for me. But with Dr. Jan Helper Hayes, holy shit. It is it's an interview that she gave in the UK, no doubt to some sort of Luciferian media outlet, because there's just no way that this gets out any other way. But she did a series of interviews over there on some, like, it looks like right-wingish media outlet there, and it's just absolutely wild. And I swear to you, I did not see it. You're just gonna have to believe me or not. But when you see this interview, you're going to be like, Ian must have saw it. I swear to God, I did not. But it nails so many of the things I said in the most recent video. I mean, some of it is stuff that's been talked about before that, like, I had pieced together or whatever, but I had no idea that this woman had done. And the thing is, she was on Trump's 2020 campaign. She claims to sit on a Department of Defense task force. It sounds like that's related to Space Force, based on some things that she says. Anyways, I'm going to get into it more. I just want to real quick say that if you haven't watched the Shadow War series, you can watch this one since it deals with primarily modern stuff. But in order to fully understand this difference between the Luciferians, like the Trump, Elon Musk, sort of more reasonable people, and the Molochians, the more evil, the Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, the Clintons, the Bush family, stuff like that, You really need to just watch this entire series. I think it'll be well worth your time. And so there's going to be a card up there for that. And so I'm sorry, I'm a bit excited. I also drank some coffee, even though it's evening time, because I just was getting jazzed just thinking about all these connections. So I just want to real quick briefly summarize what I talked about in last week's episode. So I talked about the Achilles heels of the Molochians, which is the big three, and there's a fourth one that I always forget, which I think might be the media. The big three is the Epstein-style harm of children, blackmail complex, right? That is just absolutely endemic in Western governments, especially the Five Eyes English-speaking countries, and also has deep ties to a certain Middle Eastern country. I'm going to be very careful. A certain Middle Eastern country that's on the west coast of the Mediterranean Sea on the Arabian Peninsula. They're in the news a lot right now. I'm avoiding talking about them right now not because I don't think what's going on there is important. It's actually incredibly important. It's just that it's going to set off the algorithms, and by the grace of the Most High, I haven't been getting a lot of strikes, so I'm just avoiding it. But you know what I'm talking about. It starts with an S and ends with an L, right? So that is the intelligence agency of that country is heavily involved in this blackmail operation, and you can see that through characters like Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and her father, Robert Maxwell, who absolutely worked for that. He looked like he was a double or triple agent, and he almost certainly was assassinated. Anyway, so that's one, the Epstein blackmail stuff. The second one is the banking system and just the Babylonian money magic. And then the third one is the recent mass democide attempt, right? With the you-know-whats, right? So those three things are the big Achilles heels of the Molochians. It's also in two of the three cases a major source of power. And in the third case, right, the recent you-know-what, they were trying to secure power forever, right? And usher in the Great Reset, right? That's the whole Molochian agenda. So in that episode, I talked about those Achilles heels and now how they're understalled. So, for example, there's the Pascal Najati thing, which is the old bulls, and that is a funny tie-in I just didn't even think about until I saw something from Dark Journalists that brought things together for me more, which was just like wild. But that was attacking the you-know-what. Then Senator Marsha Blackburn recently did a subpoena for the Epstein flight logs, and then Trump. Oh yeah, this is the fourth Achilles heel of the Molochians: the elections, all the election stuff that's been happening, where WEF candidates just always win. So that's the fourth Achilles heel of the Molochians, right? Because it's subversion and it's treason, right? It's either like an attempt to like subvert the government, or if you're working with foreign governments, then it's straight up treason. I'm not sure if it's considered treason or sedition or what when you are manipulating the results that occur with elections, right? So, but that is the fourth one. And so that one was also alluded to by Trump in a recent speech where he brought up watermark ballots, which was a big thing that was discussed a lot in late 2020 and early 2021. I then also mentioned the X-37B space plane, how it went up a few months before the 2020 election, and it came down right after the 2022 election, which if you look at Kerry Lake and also what's that guy Fetterman, those two results were very interesting, right? Got to be careful, right? Because the algos. And so I'm not trying to be coy with some of the stuff. It's just I literally can't say it, or else I can summon the algorithm demons, right? We don't want to do that. So and then you definitely want to go back and watch that episode to understand the complexity of what I'm talking about here in this episode. They're kind of like they're back to back. And so, by the way, thank you everyone who subscribed based on that last video. It's been super popular, one of my most popular in a while, and super pleased with that. So I also mentioned, it was funny because I was trying to draw a parallel between what Pascal Najati was doing and the old bulls moving in the Senate during the McCarthy era. with Johnson. And of course, Johnson is interwoven with the JFK assassination, right? And we're just now, we're days away. This is going to come out just a few days before, actually, I think it's on Thanksgiving, crazy enough, the 60th anniversary of the JFK assassination. And I watched the beginning of Dark Journalists, awesome, 60 years later, JFK. By the way, Dark Journalist, Dr. Joseph Farrell, I draw upon both of their research, and props to you, Daniel. If you happen to see this, you probably won't, but if Daniel lives, if you happen to see this, props to you as always. Dr. Joseph Farrell, props to you as always. I would love to have both of you on my show at some point. I haven't actually reached out to Daniel, but I should. And I've tried to get Dr. Joseph Farrell on so many times, and I just haven't had any luck making that connection. If anyone can help me make that connection, fantastic. Okay, so I watched a bit of that. And he reminded me of some crazy connections between the Kennedys, the McCarthys, and Trump, right? So RFK Sr., right, who later would become Attorney General under JFK's administration. RFK Sr. was the Attorney General that JFK appointed, and before that, he had actually been the legal assistant to Roy Cohn. Now, Roy Cohn is interesting because he's Jewish, and there's definitely a connection, right, with that country in the Middle East that I'm avoiding saying the name, right? There's definitely some interesting connections with that, and with also a certain group that fled to Argentina after the war, right? Like there's a lot of smoke here in what I'm about to say. So RFK Sr. was a legal assistant for Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was considered kind of the ultimate swamp creature, the fixer par excellence in Washington, D.C., and he was the head legal counsel for Senator McCarthy during the McCarthy. I'm actually getting chills talking about this. Now, during a specific McCarthy hearing, and again, doff of the hat to Dr. Joseph Farrell, during one of the McCarthy hearings, and this was kept out for decades afterwards, right? And then they released it in the past 10 years, I think. But during one of the McCarthy hearings, McCarthy mentions UFOs, right? Now, this is the 50s. This is the 50s, and McCarthy brings up UFOs. And that, I forget what happened, but something very dramatic happened, so he couldn't talk about that anymore. But a lot of people think that Roy Cohn was the one that gave McCarthy that heads up about the UFO connection, and McCarthy wanting to dig into the military and what the military was doing around UFOs. Okay, so Trump's mentor many years later was none other than that same Roy Cohn, the fixer guy, right? So Trump learns all of his tricks and his master manipulation stuff that he does from Roy Cohn. He was his mentor. And Trump was also really good friends with JFK Jr., right? JFK Jr. was almost certainly going to run for Senate in New York. I believe that actually, like, that even came out, and then his plane went down, and that he was eyeing the presidency. He also, like, went underground for a number of years to just deeply study his father's assassination. And you better believe that he also studied his uncle, RFK Sr.'s assassination, and that JFK Jr. and RFK Jr. had some chats. You can pretty much guarantee that. Again, tip of the hat to Dark Journalists for pointing out some of the stuff. So yeah, so JFK Jr.'s plane went down during an era when lots of people were dying from planes going down. That was kind of the CIA's favorite assassination technique of that era. For example, the Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown, and I forget, he was up to he was like talking about some interesting stuff, possibly about the Clintons. There was another guy whose name I forget that was much earlier in the 80s sometime that he wanted to talk about the globalist stuff, and he started to talk about the globalists and I think Bilderberg, and his plane diverted over Russian airspace and got shot down. I'm struggling to find that reference right now. There used to be a great website that listed all the like 30 or 40 assassinations that happened in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s with airplanes specifically. Another one is Paul Wellstone's plane went down when he like was trying to end the drug war, and he had almost gotten assassinated in Colombia when he was going down there to look at our anti-narcotics work down in Colombia. Some very strange stuff happened. He came back. He was running for president. His plane goes down. And then Senator Hines, right? So John Kerry marries Teresa Hines, who inherited her fortune from Senator Hines, her husband, right? The ketchup fortune. He was anti-drug war, just like Paul Wellstone, and his plane as well went down under mysterious circumstances. I mean, there's a raft of them. There's just a raft of them. And then if you go outside of the U.S., there's like probably 100. Like, it was very commonly used on like Central American presidents and various different ministers and so forth, European, so forth. So crazy. So JFK Jr.'s plane going down, mad suspect, right? So after JFK Jr. dies, HRC stepped in and kind of soaked up some of that sympathy, and she became senator of New York. All right. And so you can see how then if Hillary steps in after this mysterious thing falling down, right, and then it's in New York, who is that going to really piss off? Trump, right? Because his best friend just died, right? Or one of his best friends. JFK Jr. was a really close friend of Trump's, right? In fact, JFK Jr. even said that he thought Trump should run, not him, for president. Interesting. And then that, you know, someone who's in the milieu of the people who took out JFK Jr., most likely, that would make him pretty mad, and it's personal. Quick side note, Trump's uncle was a renowned physicist. Again, tip of the hat to dark journalist Daniel Liz. He goes way in depth in this stuff. He's a genius. He's a genius researcher. Fantastic. I don't agree with all his conclusions, but boy, I agree with a lot of it. He's incredible. Daniel Liz is just amazing. He, along with Dr. Joseph Farrell, are two of my very favorite researchers in this milieu, and I do draw upon both their work heavily. I just add additional connections as I see it. So I want people to keep in mind this nexus, right? So you have the Kennedys, right? Then you have McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, right? Who talks about UFOs back when nobody was basically talking about it. You have Ray Cohn, the legal counsel, this like par excellence manipulator, swamp creature, fixer, right? Who then becomes Trump's mentor. So Ray Cohn knew where all the bodies were buried and beyond. He knew where they were planning to bury bodies. Like, that guy was at the absolute center of everything in DC for decades, right? By the time he was Trump's mentor in the late 70s, early 80s, something like that, before he died, like, he had been in government since like the end of World War II, early 50s. I think Eisenhower administration is when he suddenly is like really plugged in, right? And he's definitely connected to that Middle Eastern country, which is hyper relevant for a point I'm going to make at the end. Okay, so Kennedy, according to Nikita Khrushchev's son, Kennedy had, through clandestine means outside of the military-industrial spying complex, he had contacted Nikita Khrushchev and had said that we want to do a joint mission to the moon with the Russians, basically to start thawing the Cold War, and he wanted to share everything we knew about UFOs and like learn what the Russians knew about UFOs. Literally just maybe 10 days after this exchange between Nikita Khrushchev and Kennedy happened, and again, tap of the hip for Daniel Liz for his research here, then Kennedy gets assassinated. And a lot of people are saying that that's like the bridge too far thing, right? You know, it's hard to say. Was it the Federal Reserve and the Kennedy dollars? Was it this? Was it the threat to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds? Was it all three? You know, I mean, that guy's enemies list was a mile long, and I'm not sure how JFK was able to walk around with those giant balls clanging between his legs. So Kennedy then gets assassinated, of course, and we get the eternal torch at his gravesite. Oh, Kennedy was also friends with the Forrester, I think it's Robert Forrester, who was the Secretary of Defense under Eisenhower, who then was thrown out of a window at a Walter Reed or something like that, some medical thing. And people are saying that it had some connection also to like made it like something to do with, I want to say that he was resisting or was resistant to, they tried to use MK Ultra on him and like drug him and stuff, and it didn't work. And that then they just decided they had to just straight up throw him out the window because he was too dangerous. And he too is in this whole UFO aerospace milieu. Okay, so we see here this so he gets thrown out. We get the eternal torch, and then according to some sources, Trump and Trump's presidency and everything that we're talking about here, not the Shadow Wars itself, but it's a very significant, it's the centerpiece of the American component of the Shadow War, which is one of the most significant. I mean, the three major battlegrounds are Europe, right, which right now is dominated by the Molochians, although something very funny happened in Europe not too long ago, which I'm going to get into at the end of this. So Europe is a battleground, that Middle Eastern country that I'm not going to say that starts with 9, ends in an L. And the U.S. are the three major battlegrounds where this is all happening. And that's why that country that's on the western side of the Mediterranean, why that is going to come up in this milieu. And you see it with Roy Cohn, and then you're going to see it with the three people that I mentioned at the end of this video. Okay, so that's where the rubber is hitting the road in this conflict, this Shadow Wars, and you're seeing it in particular heat up in that country that starts with an I, and here in the U.S. And Europe, I think, is going to have a series of dominoes fall as well in the not too distant future. I mean, it has to, but that's the stronghold of the Molochians. So, and yet something very odd happened in Italy of all places. So we see here, if you look at this whole picture I'm weaving here, we see here a military plan, right? Because after Kennedy died, supposedly they started this 60-year military plan to uncover the external and internal forces responsible for JFK's assassination, right? Now, mind you, in the 50s, there were all these commissions looking into things like, and this one got shut down quickly, the post-war Nazi International and communist infiltration, right? And you see that with, in particular, all the stuff around the McCarthy's hearings, right? So, but both of those were occurring. The ones that were investigating the Nazis were getting shut down quickly, and they weren't really getting any depth. And whenever it would pop its head up, it would just get smoothed over almost right away. But there was a lot of like intense investigation about communist infiltration with McCarthy and so forth, right? And okay, so now consider this. We have the military, we have a connection to space and eventually Space Force, right? And I think, I forgot to mention Trump's uncle, maybe I started to say this, renowned physicist John G. Trump oversaw the Tesla file, and he claimed the Tesla tech didn't do anything. When the FBI went in and snatched all of Tesla's original research, the second Tesla died, John G. Trump was a person that at one point had almost sole control over the Tesla file, of which tons of stuff is missing, right? We don't really know. He said it was just kind of whimsical and theoretical and philosophy more so than practical. Bullshit! Like, Tesla created the modern world, like, get out of here, right? But he said that, and who knows what he snatched out of there, and certainly what he saw and what he might have said to his nephew, right? So military, connection to space, and eventually Space Force. Now enter the fascinating character of Dr. Jan Halper Hayes. This is the interview I alluded to at the beginning. I had no idea about this, and doff of the cap, hat tip to Dan D. I don't want to say his last name in case he doesn't want to be outed or whatever, but he sent me these videos and all the stuff about devolution. I hadn't read any of this stuff. I hadn't seen these videos, and I'm going to go ahead and let these clips speak for themselves, but it is absolutely wild. So go ahead and check this out. This is wild.
Talk to Jan Halper Hayes, who's a US political analyst, and he's here in the studio. Good to see you, as always.
Good to see you.
There's so many people putting this down as a political conspiracy theory, but actually there are real questions to be answered here.
There are?
Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are.
What he's being accused of, but what part do you think is to answer that the 2020 election is going to be litigated because of this. They've made a huge, huge mistake with this one, because even though we thought what was going to happen was they were going to go after him for treason or sedition, but they did criminally charge him, but they didn't go to that extreme. As a result, he has due process, so he can subpoena people and bring things in. Now, let me say something about this 2020 election, is that Biden is the legitimate president, but he's the legitimate president of what is now the bankrupt U.S. corporation. And that was a treaty in 1871. Well, on September 12, 2018, Trump created an executive order. Within that, he outlined in future elections any kind of foreign or domestic interference, specifically for the 2020 election. So we say, how did he know some of these things were going to happen? Election integrity on both sides of the aisle is tough. It's really tough. But what this has done is it's opened the door for Trump to present his case.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because, what we see on this side of the pond is a very difficult situation where the legal system is politicised in the United States, which is abhorrent to us over here. So the fact that Trump can subpoena, some people saying it's a mistake by Jack Smith, but actually he can subpoena, people can actually see evidence from both sides. That's a sensible move. Exactly.
And it's a great mistake by Jack Smith that he's done that. Absolutely great. See, the thing is, think about Edward Snowden and all the information he had. Think about the fact that our military, our Department of Defense Space Force, if you think that they don't have the actual real results from the election, then you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, but what we do know with this is we're told that there are plenty of notes from people, including Vice President Pence, that there are some recordings of Donald Trump acknowledging that actually what he said in public was nonsense. That some of these states, whether he claimed he was out saying look, Detroit, it's corrupt, it's all corrupt, the results are corrupt. And that when in reality he knew it wasn't. That's illegal.
But you know what? That's what someone's claiming, but that's not the fact, and that's not what Donald Trump really has ever said. He's been very, very clear. I mean, the issues were, for example, in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania stepped in and changed some of the election laws. Under our Constitution, it's only the state legislators that can do that. 2,000 Mules, the film that came out, what they did, they spent over $4 million tracking the phones. And the reason it's only 2,000 mules is that based on the visits to the drop boxes in Georgia, they had to have gone over 10 times. And they've got all the film for that. So the thing is that the election integrity is so different and so problematic in every single state. But that doesn't mean that the machines didn't do something, that there were some other kind of finagling. But the long and short... Go ahead.
Well, it doesn't... But that's where conspiracy comes in, is it? To say, well, it doesn't mean that something didn't happen. Well, there's no evidence that it happened. There's how many court cases did the Trump campaign try to bring? Nothing's gone in his favour.
Okay, wait a minute. Everyone, the media goes, oh, there were 60 court cases that were rejected. No, there were 3. He won 2, he lost 1, 57 were never heard because they had no standing. And standing means that the person bringing the case has to claim some kind of impact or injury. So it's really, the media did that, and they're great at doing that, but it was a fallacy in there. And the thing is that, I sit on a task force at the Department of Defense, and the thing is, they've got the goods. They've got the goods, and Trump knew that if he presented any of the goods early on, we'd have a civil war. That he really felt that the people needed to see how bad it could get.
And that's the sense that we're getting from Trump's lawyer about what his defence is going to be. So this is all going to be based on free speech, the First Amendment in the US Constitution, that he had a right to say what he believed, and he believed that the election results were not as was put out. But the point is, if you live in a democracy and you believe in a democracy, then that means that even if you don't like the outcome of an election, you respect that, because it's a democratic vote.
Well, a democratic vote, and so therefore he should be silent about it.
No, he has a right to speak, but the issue, of course, is if he then acts to subvert that election result.
Oh, so that because you think he's being criticized because in Georgia he said, can you find me 12,000 votes? Or, you know, the thing is, he didn't try to subvert anything. What he's really done is he set up the deep state to come out, and that's why we're seeing all these things. I mean, it was revealed with whistleblowers and Hunter Biden's ex-best friend that in 2015, the head of Burisma gave Joe and Hunter Biden $10 million bribe. In 2018, Joe is on TV publicly saying that he threatened that unless they got the prosecutor fired, that he wasn't going to let them have their $1 billion in support. In 2019, Trump calls Zelensky to find out about what went on to get the prosecutor fired, and he gets impeached. I mean, we've lived with it for a long time.
We're almost out of time. I just want to pick you up on one thing. You said earlier on, you know, Donald Trump has been very clear on this. Is he a man that you believe? I mean, look, he's about as believable as a chocolate teapot, isn't he?
Look, I know that. Oh, thank God you got the negativity in at the end and not the beginning. I can always count on you for that. Always.
But it's a legitimate point to say that Donald Trump is a man who always speaks the truth. That can't be the case. I mean, it's hardly the case of any leader, to be fair, but, I mean, definitely not Donald Trump.
Well, I don't know if I said everything or always, because I do call him the embellisher-in-chief, because he's a marketer. But in terms of telling us things, optics, you better believe that he's very much a straight shooter in terms of actions that he's going to take or what he thinks needs to be done. You know, they made fun of him because they assumed he broke protocol and walked in front of the Queen. No, if you go back and look at it, you will see he looked at her. She gave a wave with her hand. He proceeded. She took a couple of steps, he stopped, and he waited for her to join. That was an optic to tell us that he then was going to bankrupt the U.S. corporation, because it was the Vatican, the Crown, and the U.S. that was part since 1871. And we were giving you our tax dollars. We were paying back. You know, forget this Tea Party and without taxation, without representation. We owed you a lot of money because you helped us in the Civil War. And so that is what Trump has now, he told the Queen, I'm ending this. We're dissolving this corporation. We're going to go back to being a republic and we'll all be separate. The Pope wasn't happy. You should find the picture of him visiting the Pope. It took 650 planes to remove our gold from the Vatican Bank.
I'm not very happy about it, Jan, to be perfectly honest. We could do with your money at the minute. Keep it flowing, I say. Jan Halberhayes, really good to see you. Thank you very much.
The fact is that Trump came out at this point announcing his candidacy because he knew and he wanted to test who was going to be against him. And that is part of why we have this corrupt media. You could go to Wikipedia and find Operation Mockingbird, that the CIA has been in there forever. Then Obama repealed the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, which then permitted propaganda to be in broadcasting. It no longer said that it had to be credible. And so when he came out and said fake news, he warned us at the end of his speech that it is going to be very hard. The establishment, the media, the globalists are all going to come after. They're going to try to intimidate, but he needed to smoke him out. And guess what happened? The next day, Congress on the Democrat side wanted to create a law that he couldn't run. Then what happened was the Republicans came out and said they were going to investigate Hunter Biden. And Friday, the Department of Justice, AG, I'd like to forget his name, but what did he do? He launched an investigation and he put the most corrupt prosecutor who hates Trump on it. Let me go back to you saying about Trump coming across as a victim. I'm sorry that you interpret it that way, because that's not really it. And I really want people to understand that they need to go to other sources, because the media will not tell you about his successes. They will not tell you about anything that he does positively. They'll not tell you about his executive orders, 13848. They won't tell you about some of the other articles that he did. They won't tell you about the devolution, the continuity of government plan that he put in. The reason that his Mar-a-Lago was seized upon was that they really wanted to get the PEDS, the Presidential Emergency Act document, which is only what Trump knows and the military, that he had to put in place, because before he left, he declared 2 national emergencies. And you know what? Biden hasn't reversed that. Biden has signed on to 3 of his executive orders to continue them going. So we have some very fascinating things that are going to come out in the next 60 to 90 days.
Okay. Wow. Right? Like, okay, so here's the thing. Those clips you just watched, but especially the longer first one, that was reposted and reshared on Truth Social, first by Don Trump Jr., and then by Trump himself retweeted or retruthed, whatever, Trump Jr. posting that. What the actual fuck, bro? That is crazy. And like I said, do you see now why it looks like I had watched that verse? I swear to you, I haven't. I just am like a bit agog. So I just want to like hit some of the highlights of what she said there. And there was a lot, right? And I also like, you see the way that guy kind of plays the lightweight bad cop, but he kind of like, they never interrupt her. They never address what she says. They act like she's not even saying what she's saying when she's like carpet bombing with truth bombs and revelations of like the absolute highest order. They don't, I don't understand how this is on the air anywhere, especially in the English speaking world. It's absolutely incredible. So she says Biden is president of a bankrupt corporation, right? Which was founded in 1871. Right, that's where you get into the whole the new Constitution of the United States, which then made all of us have the capitalized names on all legal documents, which then all of our income actually secretly through the IRS or whatever, our income taxes, some large percentage of them goes to some Vatican stock exchange where the ultra wealthy, right? So probably our friends, the Venetian black nobility, right? That they, I'm trying not to go too hard on those guys lest they get pissed. Someone said something a while ago about them harassing someone talking about them, and that kind of, I have to admit, that kind of spooked me. I mean, I have, I have family, so I don't want anyone to get hurt, but and the angel told me not to talk about it too much anymore, so I'm not going to. But yeah, so like very wealthy people in Italy and elsewhere, like the nobility, are able to basically buy and sell our stocks. And hot stock tips, I can't even talk, I'm so excited. Hot stock tip for any ultra wealthy people watching this: you should buy this guy's stock because it's going up. Okay, so executive, and also you should buy it and free me and give me my stock certificate. That's something I plan to do when I'm ultra wealthy someday, is buy and free my family from those stocks. So she also mentions that Trump did Executive Order 13848 imposing certain sanctions in the event of election interference, foreign election interference in the United States election. So she claims to sit on a task force at the DOD, and it seems, based on some things she said, that it's something related to Space Force. Okay, so she claims that they have it all. right? We've heard this before from that 17th letter of the alphabet, first letter in the word queen, right? For anyone who paid any attention to that, I thought there was something to it. I still do think there's something to it, but what I think it is I think it's a series of nested plans. The overt plan of the Molochians was to try and smoke out patriots. That's how the Luciferians sold it to them, that they could use it as a classic dyeing the waters operation to see where certain information went so they could smoke people out. Now, Luciferians suggested it to them. This is what I believe happened anyways, it's speculative. And they suggested to them to be like an operation, oh gosh, what is it called? They had it after the Bolshevik Revolution. Oh gosh darn it. Well, anyways, there was a Bolshevik operation where they said that there was people coming back in to restore the Tsar and that they would fight against the communists, and they used that to find all the Tsar loyalists and smoke them out, and then they grabbed them and executed them, right? Operation Trust, that's what it was called. So some people said that that's what happened with the whole 17th letter thing. And that's what I thought for a long time, because I hadn't yet got this download from the angels about the Luciferians versus the Molochians versus Most High, right? And so once I got that, what I realized is that there's the top layer, which is the Molochians smoking out the patriots. That did happen, and a certain amount of people were thrown on their bus. Probably people that weren't super important, or people that knew they were going to get nabbed and were willing to take it for the team, right? But then underneath that is the Luciferian agenda, right? And the Luciferian agenda is hidden in plain sight. And what that agenda is to put out the narrative, right? About the Epsteins, about all the horrible stuff that's going on, and get it out there more and more and more. So that way people start to think about it in terms of this struggle, right? They call themselves white hats, but they would be better called gray hats, right? Because they are Luciferian. And that explains why they're willing to let all this suffering occur in order, the whole thing of where Biden wins, and then they let him do all this stuff in order to show people how bad it would get, right? And things like the you-know-what and all the little kids. Anyone who's a true white hat, meaning most high aligned, would never do that. I would never do that. I would never allow, thousands or millions of children to be killed or sterilized just in order to save more people down the road. That's one of those weird kind of like trolley things where you can pull the lever and kill 2 people instead of letting it go into a crowd of 10. Like, that's the kind of insane stuff that's just like, most high people would have like tried to put a stop to it right away. They wouldn't have been able to help themselves. Whereas Luciferians are like, hey, break a few eggs to make an omelet. That's okay. Why? Because they want to do this narrative. They want to create the narrative because the narrative is what runs society, and they understand that. And so they have to first discredit the old guard and also create a narrative of they have a right to rule, a mandate of heaven, because of how evil the prior administration, if you will, was. And so therefore, once people hear about the Epstein stuff, the banking stuff, the election stuff, the you-know-what stuff, and all that is out there, and all of that's been getting dripped out there intensely for the past 4 years, right? Ever since that stuff has been getting dripped out there, it's forming a narrative of these guys have no right to rule because they're pure evil, one that's largely based in truth. Now, what the Luciferians are obfuscating is their role in what happened. They're the ones who invented the mRNA stuff. They're the ones that perfected stuff to manipulate results when you have voting, right? An election. Have to be careful, again, algos. And so they almost everything that's naughty and bad that the Molochians ever did that has an ounce of intelligence to it, that isn't just like burn the witch at the stake, torture them to death. Anything that has an ounce of intelligence to it, that was the Luciferians, right? And so they want to discredit the Molochians, make themselves look like heroes, and obfuscate what they've done that's not okay, or justify it in some kind of way, right? So this Dr. Jan Halper Hayes, she claims that if Trump and the military decided that they couldn't provide evidence too early on, or they would risk a civil war. And they also did it to get the deep state and all the deep state operatives who are working for the WEF, the Chinese, right? You know, the Italians, anyone else they might be working for, that country that starts with an I in the Middle East, finding the ones that aren't their agents, because that country in the Middle East is like one of the ground zeros of what's going on in terms of this power struggle. And there's an internecine conflict between at least two Jewish groups that are Molochian and Luciferian. And of course, there's Jews that are most high aligned, just like everybody else, Islam, Hindus, Buddhist, whatever, right? Christians. Atheists tend to be Molochian aligned, whether they know it or not. But even some atheists are just like momentarily confused and will come out of it, right? But there's good people in all groups, and there's bad people in all groups. But there is a nexus around that country and a huge power struggle going on. You see it with what's going on with Netanyahu and the corruption case, and then what happened on the 7th of October, and all this kind of stuff. Like, there's huge things underway going on with that country. And so, like, finding the Molochian agents that are deeply embedded from that country is probably one of the things they're doing with all this. So she also mentions, this is just crazy. She says just kind of casually, when Trump went in front of the Queen, it was to declare that he had bankrupted the corporation, the United States, restored the Republic, and that corporation had been under the Vatican, right? Because of that stock exchange thing. The Crown, right? The English Queen, which they're JV, VBN, right? Black nobility, right? They're the JV squad in that. And then the US, and it had been since 1871, it had to do with the treaty we did, and it was part of what created the Washington, D.C. as its own kind of like pseudo country that has its own laws, much like the Vatican and the City of London, right? So that's when that begins in the US. That's when the Molochians really get a foothold in the US that is like really metastasizes. They had tried a couple times with the First Bank of the United States, Second Bank of the United States, and then this is when they really get a foothold, and then they really cement it with World War I, the League of Nations, all under Woodrow Wilson, who is like one of our worst presidents of all time. He's like, top 3 for me, worst presidents ever. IRS and income tax, right? And the Federal Reserve, all done under Woodrow Wilson, vile. And so Helper then, Dr. Jan Helper Hayes then states that Trump instituted devolution versus continuity of government plans, and that they were looking for a presidential emergency action documents when they raided Mar-a-Lago. That is super interesting, because Daniel List did some good research, and I don't think he's noticed this yet or considered this. There was the former head of the combatant commander, O'Shaughnessy. He was leaking stuff about Trump, and then Esper got rid of him, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, and then Trump got rid of Esper right after the election, and then O'Shaughnessy gets replaced by a German last name anyways, who's from the 181st Airborne, I think it is, Van Herk, right? So you go from an Irishman, right, which Irish tend to be connected with Catholics, tend to be, and I was raised Catholic, not dogging on Catholics here, very often aligned with the Molochians, right? So I just think this is interesting. And then you have Van Herk, a German last name, and the 181st is, I believe, the people who responded first to Roswell, but they're very connected in with the UFO file, with the Ultratech, as I call it. So what if Trump got rid of that continuity of government guy, got Van Herk pulled up to that position, and then instituted devolution continuity of government stuff with his new guy, who's the new head of NORAD, who's the new combatant commander, and then they flip the script, right? The Molochians have been wanting to use continuity of government forever, right? Since at least since the revelations that came out about Rex 84 and continuity of government that came out during the Iran-Contra affair, right? Which is loaded, like so much information came out during those hearings, and a lot of it got suppressed right away by Daniel Inouye. They said we have to go into executive session. I talk about it in other videos. I'm not going to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but suffice to say, the Molochians have had a long-term plan of using the continuity of government stuff in order to take over. And in fact, they seem to, according to Daniel Liz's research and also Professor Peter Dale Scott, the continuity of government telecommunications, like super hardened telephones that like nobody can listen into, supposedly, those are always involved. Communications occur in that before, during, and after these so-called deep events like the JFK assassination, like 9/11, right? There's calls that go over this because it's like it's the most secure method of communication. But what if it's not completely secure? What if with some modern technology, or maybe even something that's been in there since the beginning or since the very early stages, right? Because Cheyenne Mountain doesn't get complete until, I want to say, late 70s, but certainly after JFK, I'm almost positive of that. Let me just double check that. When did Cheyenne Mountain completion? Let's see. Cheyenne Mountain was completed. Oh, it's not going to tell me. It's funny because up came an article about COVID-19. It finished being built in 1966. So 3 years after Kennedy. This is interesting. It's now operated by the United States Space Force. Okay, man. This is just getting crazy, these connections. I'm getting really excited about this. Okay. So what if Trump flipped the script and he put his guy in? I know Space Force from Cheyenne Mountain now. I didn't know that till just literally the second. Oh my God. And so they and I did a snort laugh. I know I'll get comments down below probably about that. But then he puts this continuity of government stuff in, and that's what's been happening this whole time, right? This continuity of government stuff has kicked in and has taken over. And that would mean that, the military is in control, which I've heard repeatedly, and I doubted it, but now I'm wondering. Oh, by the way, Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes, also relevant to this whole milieu, she mentioned that it took 650 planes. I have to feel like that's got to be like some kind of, maybe not typo, but like misspeaking on her time, because like 65 planes at a couple tons a piece, say 15 tons a piece, would be an absolutely astronomical amount of gold. If you figure, let's just say they carry 10 tons of gold, that would be 6,500 tons of gold. That would be more than we supposedly had at, or like half maybe the hoard that we have at, supposedly have, I should say, at Fort Knox. But she claims they took 650 planes to remove our gold from the Vatican Bank, which is what the actual fuck? Like, that is an insane amount of gold. Speaking of gold related to Vatican and Crown, there was a huge amount of gold and silver that was in WTC 7 on 9/11, and it was owned by the Queen, and it went missing, and the Queen got pissed and wanted to investigate it. And I've heard that 9/11 was a nested operation, and among others, this Nazi International was involved. So the worm has turned. The reason I had that title is because I had a vision. When it wasn't a vision, it was a channeled prophecy from the angelic choir known as the Virtues, and the Virtues showed me this whole long thing. And at the very end of it, Trump was riding on this snake, and he turned his head and he said, "The worm will turn. It always does." Right? And at the time, Trump looked really beaten down. It looked like everything was over. Biden was in full control, right? This was just when the first little things that were the first little green shoots of hope, like the COVID thing, was winding down, right? So, and it was interesting because in that one video, you notice it said in 60 to 90 days, there'll be big revelations. And during that time period, it was when a lot of the COVID stuff came out. It's also when Musk came out and launched all those salvos at the WEF, and Bezos and Gates suddenly were scrambling to make a brain chip. There was a lot of very interesting stuff that came out that time. That's also during the period of time, I believe it was during that period of time. No, it was actually a year earlier when Pope Francis said he was going to retire, which there's only been like 4 retirements ever in the history of the papacy, 800, whatever, 1,000 years of history. It's only happened like 4 times. It never happens. They always like hold on to the staff of power until death, like the Skeksis and Dark Crystal, right? So the worm has turned. You're starting to see a lot of action, right? You're starting to see a lot of smoke, and you're starting to see a bit of fire as well. Dr. Jan Halpert-Hayes gives this interview. Trump co-signs on it. What the fuck? Trump mentions watermark ballots at a rally. Senator Marsha Blackburn subpoenas the Epstein documents. More and more stuff is coming out about the you-know-what all the time, Pascal Najati. And look what's happened in the past like year and a half. We had the election of Giorgia Meloni, and the election just happened a couple days ago of Javier Milei in Argentina. Now, Giorgia Meloni, she banned the LGBTQ day and replaced it with Family Day. She just did a Lord of the Rings opening, which actually that may sound silly, but symbolically Lord of the Rings has become kind of core Western mythos, especially in modern times. A lot more people are going to think about the Lord of the Rings than they are a lot of classic European folklore, and it's become basically European folklore at this point in mythology, and it's been heavily attacked by the Molochians. They have some kind of bitter hatred of it, probably because evil gets its ass kicked, and it has very strong Western cultural values in it. She's super supportive of, I'm going to just say the name. Well, no, I'm not going to. She's super supportive of that Middle Eastern country that's on the west coast of the Mediterranean, right? So's Javier Milei. He, in fact, says that he studies the Torah all the time and he wants to become Jewish. Weird that he hasn't already become Jewish, because surely a guy that wealthy can get it done. It isn't easy to become Jewish, but it's also not impossible. And so if this guy wanted to, surely he could. But he's not Jewish, and neither's Giorgia Meloni, and neither's Trump. Trump was given the crown of Jerusalem in July this past year by a group of, it's like the Jewish Heritage Foundation or something like that. And I believe they control the tomb of David, King David, if I recall correctly. I think so. I'll put a correction if I'm wrong, if I have time to fact check that. But they gave him this crown of Jerusalem, which is interesting because there's weird stuff about the gold-haired or blonde-haired Goy king. I have to chase that down. I've heard people refer to it. I can't really find it. It gets into some anti-Semitic stuff that I don't like. I mean, look, there's no question, there's a lot of, like I said, Jewish people are at the nexus of all this. I've said before that the VBN uses them as frontmen, and that's kind of the way that you should see them, as the concierge class / ultimate firewall to protect the true manipulators, which are Babylonian dark sorcerers, right? Okay, so quick weird edit. I had meant to say here, but I was very excited. My mind was going a mile a minute. I meant to say here in this section, I'm going to cut back in to the last little bit, that the election of Giorgia Meloni and also now Javier Milei down in Argentina are they both openly talk about that they like Trump. They're both super staunch advocates of that Middle Eastern country on the western side of the Mediterranean. Super staunch advocates, right? And then Trump, of course, got that crown, right, from a Jewish heritage group. Very interesting. And then basically all three of them talk about the globalists all the time, and all three of them are quite clearly, to me, Luciferian. You can see especially Milei, I feel like, has a really quite scary vibe, but not just not in the way that most of these Molochians are, although he does seem to be lower vibration than Trump. I I'm not sure. He just seems very aggressive. I like some of the things he says. It might just be his style. It might just be that Argentine culture. Maybe I'm not giving him a fair shake because he isn't American, but he is very aggressive, and he does seem to be planning to gut the government down there to a point that is a little concerning even for me, even though I agree with a lot of what he plans to do. Some of it just seems a little kind of like, whoa, like, you know, I kind of consider myself I guess sort of libertarian nowadays, something like that. God, I don't even know. But he is he plans to just like cut like everything in government to a point to where I'm just like, I think that's a little too much. I understand, right? I understand the whole idea, get government out of the way, and I largely agree with that, but I think that's just too much, too fast. But I digress. The point is that he speaks out against the globalists all the time. So does Maloney. And how did they get in? Right? How did they get in? Especially Meloni in Italy, of all places. How did she get into power? Despite that there should be like a total lockdown on especially Italy, and yet she not only got in power, she stayed in power. And they just recently, she managed to get Italy's out of junk bond status, which is an incredible feat. And she did it almost immediately, which is just absolutely staggering. And one of the things the Luciferians very much one of their signatures is that they try to revitalize capitalism. The Molochians are trying to destroy capitalism and replace it with this circular economy nonsense, Frankfurt School of Communism, basically. And so how did Maloney and Milei both recently win, right? Don't the WEF candidates always win? Don't the Molochian candidates always win? How come they're not winning all of a sudden? And how come they haven't been able to take out Maloney? And she's been in office now for over a year. So that's something I forgot to mention here. That's it. And then back to the video without this awkward edit. So Javier Milei winning in Argentina is also weird because Argentina is fascinating given the post-war nexus of the Nazi International with things like the Mannlicher Carcano rifle, which is made in Argentina. That was the original rifle reported that Oswald had used at JFK, which then turned into, I forget what they turned it into. It's some other kind of rifle. They might have even said it was a Mauser at one point, I think. But that's curious because that's an Argentine rifle, and Argentina, of course, is famously where a ton of the Nazis fled after the war. And it's also interesting because Jim Garrison said in an interview with Ramparts magazine, again, hat tip to Daniel Liz, that he kept finding aerospace company connections and that they had assassins. And, you know, as you can see from this graphic I'm about to put up, the Nazis did not go away at the end of World War II, quite the opposite, and they were heavily embedded in the Western security apparatus, but especially the United States. So, yeah, there is big stuff going on and things are starting to shift, and the Luciferians are making some really big moves and they're just laying the groundwork. And you get the feeling that, you know, this is just this is just foreplay. This is a prelude to something massive. That's what she said. Yeah. So it's getting real out there, folks. I had to just hurry up and do another one because so much amazing stuff. And again, special shout out to Dan D. Also, you know who you are. I'm just going to do a shout out. I'm also going to show this. This is basically a magic ring, and it's I'm a Vedic astrologer, and I am actually offering a Black Friday sale, which I advertised at the beginning because I'm going to do a separate clip for that. And this ring, it helps me as someone who is a Virgo rising in my natal chart, and I'm a Taurus rising in my Navamsa chart for post 40. This ring actually helps me with my first house characteristics, so body, willpower, health, just overall success in life, and then 10th house career. And then it also helps with second house of income in my Navamsa, my second half of life chart, and 5th house of children past life credit. And it's involved in a bunch of yogas or yokes of destiny I have in my Navamsa chart that are all related to Mercury. And that's why I wear this ring, because it's a Mercury ring that's very helpful for that. And so if you're interested, I plan on actually I'm probably gonna do an episode about Vedic gemstone remedies to help strengthen your chart. But if you're interested in learning a little bit about actually a ton about your karmas and what's going to unfold in your life, and there's a first half of life, 40 years and under, and there's a second half of life, post 40 Navamsa chart. If you want to learn about the kind of karmas that are going to unfold for you, and I can see my life exactly as it is, both my natal chart, which sucks, and my Navamsa chart, which is awesome, and it's really starting to come to fruition now. All of the awesome stuff that's promised in my second half of life chart. And you might be fascinated to find out what's coming up for you around your love life, around income, sudden bursts of wealth that could come out of the blue, friends, right? And career. Oh, and children, when and if you might have children. All of that can be seen in the karmas of your chart. And so if you're interested in having your chart read, I am offering a Black Friday sale for 15% off, one day only. And in 2024, I will be increasing prices for all my services because, hey, thanks, Biden, mega inflation, right? And, you know, man's got to eat, got to keep the lights on, roof over your head, and I got to take care of my family. And so help out my family, and I promise you I'll help out you and yours by giving you like incredible guidance. Also, if you're just interested in generalized spiritual guidance, I would be honored and privileged to do that and see what comes through from the angels and the Most High that I can share with you. And also, I will be in 2024 teaching angelic magic classes again. And so thank you so much for watching. And if you got this far, hit that like and subscribe. And thank you so much. And we're going to have that Musk episode one of these days. Not sure when exactly. Yeah, and please also comment down below and with an emoji in there. It helps the algorithm. And just comment on anything you find interesting. And if you have any questions or there's things you'd like to see in future episodes, you know, obviously I can't do all of them, but I do look and read all comments, and I respond to comments that are reasonable. I respond to even people disagreeing with me about stuff, as long as you're not nasty. If you're nasty and rude, I just delete the comment and you don't get a response. And if it's bad enough, you're just blocked from the channel. And so just keep it respectful. You can disagree with me all you want with my guests, you know. I reserve the right not to respond, of course, but I do read all comments. And so anyways, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.